What are the different types of editors? Ghostwriter, content editor, developmental editor, copy editor, line editor, proofreader. What do you need? You want to make the right choice and avoid unnecessary spending. I'm doing a series of videos on this topic because choosing the editor who is right for you not only involves selecting the right kind of editor, but also the right individual, because these choices will directly affect the quality of your book. I'll begin with the overview, and then I'll focus on specific categories of editors. I'll conclude the series with some recommendations about choosing an editor. And in this video, I'll tell you about a woman who refused to accept that she needed an editor and how that cost her thousands of dollars. Begin with self-evaluation. What kind of editor you need depends greatly on your level of writing skill. Ask yourself this question: how much writing experience do I have? How recent is it? If you were editor of your high school newsletter and you're now 50 years old and you haven't been doing substantial writing since, chances are you've got rusty skills. If you've been blogging, writing reports, speeches, or articles in connection with your work, you likely have more polished skills. When your work gets edited and proofed by others prior to publication, you've probably gotten feedback about any grammatical or technical weaknesses. I know, that can be tough. In my experience as an editor, I've worked with people who love feedback and readily accept my changes, and I've worked with others who want me to justify every change and fight them. In fact, I went through this process with one man who hired me to edit his book, and after our first conversation, in which he asked me to explain every change, he relaxed. Our following conversations were much easier because he accepted that I had the skill to make his book more understandable and polished. He trusted my recommendations. Here's what he had to say about the process of working with me.
I can't say enough about my editor, Patricia Iyer. A consummate professional, she served me as a valued and objective outsider, reviewing and editing and organizing my manuscript from her fresh and experienced perspective. Most importantly, she reminded me of the importance of writing to my audience and not to myself.
Having a lot of experience with technical or business writing can prove to be a disadvantage. When you use words and phrases that are hard to understand or are filled with jargon. You might, for example, find your writing has a particular style and uses a language that has evolved within your company. By language, I'm not referring to English or Mandarin, but to something Jerry Mitai explained called business blather. He's the author of a book with the same name. You can also call business blather corporate speak. It's the verbal equivalent of a secret handshake, and it doesn't translate well to outsiders. If you use it in your manuscript, the copy editor will likely have many, what does this mean, comments. The line editor may pick up on hackneyed language, cliches, and other stylistic issues. Here's a tip that will improve your writing. Read a lot. This would include both fiction and nonfiction. If you're asking why reading fiction helps with nonfiction writing skills, it's because whether you write fiction or nonfiction, you're telling a story. You'll be using dialogue, description, and other elements of writing that fiction writers employ. If you answer, I don't like to read, I have another question. Why do you want to write? In general, people who enjoy writing also enjoy reading. If you enjoy neither, but you feel you have a story to tell, your best bet is to hire a ghostwriter who will do the actual writing. You may say, I want this to be my book. I don't want someone else taking over. If you have a house, does it become less yours because you hire professionals to do flooring, repairs, cleaning, and other things that a house needs? A professional editor will respect your viewpoint and your vision for your book. You can always have the final say, it's your book. You may say, I might need an editor, but it feels like I'm giving up my control. It means I admit I need help. You've worked hard on your manuscript, but you've run into some challenges you can't surmount. You may have developed tunnel vision, becoming so immersed in your work that you've lost perspective. This is when an editor who's not emotionally involved in your work and therefore has an objective point of view can come to the rescue. Sometimes it only takes a sense of, what if you did this? These suggestions get your manuscript back on track. If you ask for help, it doesn't mean you're not a writer. Here's another objective to editing. I plan to submit my book to a publishing house. Won't they edit it? Here are some additional questions to focus your choice. At what stage is your project? The categories I described below aren't the only kinds of editors you might choose. They represent the major categories. I've abbreviated the list for purposes of simplicity. If you must choose among 10 categories of editors, you can feel both overwhelmed and incompetent to make the choice. If you feel that none of the categories quite describe what you need, ask writer friends or do some research. Let's dive into the kinds of editors. First, the developmental editor is the person who can help you, especially in the early stages of the project. They can help create a structure for your work by organizing its elements. They contribute to making the progression of your manuscript logical, and they can recommend strengthening certain elements to provide more interesting content. Overall, think of them as the big picture editors. Their perspective is macroscopic rather than microscopic. They don't look at commas. The line editor provides the microscopic polish and looks at how the author uses language in each sentence. She or he looks for cliches, poor pacing, run-on or overly long sentences, overuse of passive voice, incorrect word usage, and other errors. This kind of editing tightens up a sentence. The copy editor focuses on making sure the author adhered to the rules of standard English. No, you can't use 3 exclamation marks. Yes, you should use commas. The copy editor searches for typos and other mistakes. The proofreader catches everything a copy editor misses. Sometimes this stage gets skipped, but it's usually then results in errors. This is the last stage of editing before a book goes into production, and sometimes the copy editor and the proofreader are the same person. When I refer to myself as an editor, it means I provide line editing, copy editing, and proofreading for the clients who I serve. A critical point I want to leave you with is the need to recognize that somebody else can see the flaws that you tend to overlook. No one's writing is perfect. You lose objectivity with what you've written, or you get into a habit of expressing yourself in a certain way. Someone else who is proficient at editing will see the wording that needs to be changed. When I ran my legal nurse consulting business, I subcontracted cases to expert witnesses who were either nurses or other types of medical experts. I required my expert witnesses to send their report to me so that my in-house nurse or I could proofread the report before it went to the attorney-client. I had an expert, I'll call her Debbie. The first time I worked with Debbie, she turned in a report that needed major editing. She used incomplete sentences. She had typos, and she didn't organize the report the way that it should be laid out. When I went over this with her about what needed to be changed, she was highly offended. No one has ever given me this kind of feedback on my reports. She fixed all the issues that I found, and she swore she would never work with my company again. That decision cost her thousands of dollars. I would have sent her other cases if she had been open to suggestions and acknowledged my experience, which involved proofreading thousands of expert witness reports. But instead, her ego and her pride prevented her from benefiting from my guidance. Be open to suggestions for changes. An editor wants you to look good in whatever you write. In my next video, I'll share tips on working with a specific type of professional, a book coach, or a developmental editor to create a book that will gain you more visibility and authority in your field. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, click on this button, and leave a comment below.